Welcome to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast, episode 99.
Welcome to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast with your host, Jack Mountain Bushcraft School founder and Master Main Guide, Tim Smith.
I'm your host, Tim Smith. I'm a registered Master Main Guide and have been a full-time outdoor instructor and guide since founding the Jack Mountain Bushcraft School in 1999. We help people become more skilled, more knowledgeable, more experienced, and more confident in the natural world through our bushcraft and guide training semester programs and multi-week canoe and snowshoe expeditions. You can check out the show notes to all of our podcasts at blog.jackmtn.com. If you're interested in learning more about our college-accredited and GI Bill-approved programs, visit the Jack Mountain Bushcraft School on the web at jackmtn.com. And check out our online network and digital learning academy at bushcraftschool.com. Hello and welcome back to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast. After a winter away from podcast land, we are back.
Yes, we are.
We are in the communications layer of our semi-subterranean northern Maine layer. No, communication level of our semi-subterranean.
We sorted this out a few episodes ago, but I don't remember.
I don't remember anything.
We got to keep better records.
Keep better records.
I don't remember anything.
So the date today, April 11th, 2021. Today, in a few hours, people will be arriving for our spring wilderness guide training semester. So we're going to be hard at it here in the woods for the next 9 weeks. And it's an early spring. This is the earliest spring I remember up here. There's just about no snow left in early April. And to put things in perspective, the last few years running spring semesters, we haven't been able to drive down our road until May. Like first week in May or so, because there's so much snow. Last year, I remember getting stuck, and it was April 28th, and I got stuck in like, I don't know, a 4-foot snowdrift.
Yep.
But this year, not a lot of snow comparatively, and a lot of warm, or really early warm temperatures. So it's weird, but I'm sure wherever you're listening to this, weather is weird now.
Yeah, it's very strange to be up here and see just no snow on the ground. And I think about semesters in the past where we've had to, have everybody park at the top of our hill and ferry everybody up and down on a snowmobile, or have them just, drag their stuff down with a sled.
Stuff in. It's just it feels like we're a month early for this weather.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
And last spring we started 3 weeks later with all the coronavirus stuff, and we still had, we were still getting stuck with snow and stuff like that. So, yeah, very odd.
Very odd. We're hoping that we don't get another drought this summer because the river's at like full flood stage right now, and it'll be coming down, and hopefully we get plenty of rain to keep the water levels high so we don't end up with just a trickle, like a mud-filled ditch, which some of the rivers turned into last summer.
Definitely did. A lot of scraping boats.
Yeah. So that's what we've got going on. We're going to, since we last got together around the old microphone, we're going to do a little bit of a sort of a current events, how I spent the winter, how I spent my winter vacation.
How did you spend your winter vacation, Tim?
Yeah, so Tim loaded up the truck and our smaller of our 2 canoe trailers. I brought a sea kayak, 2 sea kayaks and a canoe and a bunch of camping gear, and I spent the winter in Texas. My wife and kids are now in Texas, and I'm down there when I'm not up here, and had big plans to canoe the Rio Grande River along the border of Texas and Mexico, to do a bunch of sea kayaking down at the coast, but got down to Texas around Thanksgiving and spent a few weeks just sort of catching up, and then I got sick. I had COVID. So I think it was like the day after Christmas, right around Christmas time. I remember before I went to bed one night, I think it was the 28th of December, actually, right before going to bed, had like a scratchy throat, didn't feel real good, and woke up the next day with very little energy and figured, I probably had the flu or some sort of allergy. And it didn't go away. And after 2 weeks of kind of not doing very much, I went and got a COVID test, and it was positive, and the people there said, "Hey, you should go to the emergency room right now. There's something really screwy going on with you." And I did, and I was in the hospital for 12 days, and it almost killed me.
Yeah.
And since then, that was in January. I had the luxury of like the rehab and recovery, and it was. To put things in perspective, I don't go to the hospital very often. I think the last time before then I was, maybe I got stitches at some point, but 1992 I had a shoulder surgery, and that was my last time in the hospital. So it was interesting, and definitely the recovery period was, it was very slow for me, and it was very challenging. I remember getting out of the hospital, and actually while I was in the hospital, I had super low oxygen levels and a bit of COVID pneumonia. I feel great now, by the way, but I remember, they were saying, "Okay, we want you to walk to the window." It's like 4 steps. And I remember doing that, and then I sat down and had to take a nap because it was like I had just summited Everest. It was like the hardest thing I had ever done. And then, when I got out of the hospital, going for walks and things to walk the dog, so the first walk, I remember all excited to go out and start covering some miles, and I think I went about 40 yards and had to like take a knee, literally like go down on a knee and like breathe hard, and it's very humbling, right? It's very humbling to not have the things that we take for granted physically.
Yeah.
But since then, again, a long, slow recovery. And one of the benefits of a big health scare is they're usually followed by a big health kick. So have been living pretty clean since then, and continuing that trend. So just drove back up here from Texas, got my second shot of the vaccine. And you may have noticed, if you were on the road somewhere between here, Maine and Texas, a big white truck pulling a trailer with a couple of boats on it. None of the boats which were used. My son and I took the canoe out for like a half-a-mile paddle. So I dragged a trailer with a bunch of boats halfway across the North American continent so that they could sit and not be used. Anyway, it's a long-ass drive.
Yeah, well, so we kind of tend to handle everything up here with a sort of, I don't know, occasionally a little bit of a grim sense of humor. And I remember in the fall, the few weeks before the semester ended, a almost manic preparation for all this stuff. And you were looking at special gear you needed for the Rio Grande and stuff. And
yeah.
So there's a little bit of it's awful that you didn't get to use it, but luckily for us, with our particular senses of humor, there's a little bit of like the gods up on Mount Olympus. We're just like, no, you're not going to do that this winter.
We shall smite him.
Have you ever felt futility? You're gonna. But yeah, I imagine I speak for everybody listening when it's good that you're getting back to it and not dead.
Yeah, any day above ground's a good day.
Any day above ground's a good day.
But yeah, it's always interesting to have your plans questioned and your plans changed, because I do think it makes you more resilient.
Yeah.
And resiliency is sort of the nature of the game with any sort of long-term illness. I think the things that really helped me get through it, and I'm going to shoot some video here, and we'll talk about that in the video. But I remember, the first night in the hospital, you're in the intensive care unit, and there's all these wires coming out of me, and you're attached to all these things that are monitoring everything, and just thinking like, yeah, well, who knows? Is this it? You're like, is this it for me? And thankfully it wasn't it, but the things that get you through challenging situations, whether it's medical or whatever, or a hard time in the forest on a long trip, keeping a positive mental attitude, realizing it can always be worse, and to a certain degree, mental toughness. And, you can define that however you like to. I like to define it by having sort of an unflappable confidence that things are going to get better. And, that's kind of when I was severely challenged mentally, going through that whole ordeal, that's what kind of pulled me through. So happy for that.
Yeah. It's a tricky one to bounce back from. I have not had COVID, and I imagine that it would be a tricky thing to come back from.
Yeah, well, any like long-term illness is a challenge, especially when you kind of I don't want to say self-image, but maybe your livelihood is based on something very physical. Then when you don't have that, it's much more challenging, right? When you don't have the ability to be physical like that for a period of time, it's hard. It's hard mentally. Obviously, it's hard physically. But I think you lead with the mental, right? If you have all your ducks in a row with having a positive mental attitude and mental toughness and things of that nature, which we talk about a lot on the podcast, then the physical stuff can fall into place. But if you don't have that, then life's just that much harder. Yeah, definitely. Well, like I said, I did not get COVID this winter. I spent the winter, I was pretty active. I ran a couple of we're basically done with the year-long program. This is its initial year, so I ran that, had students out, sleeping out in front of fires on cold winter nights and kind of getting their head around all of our systems for outdoor living before they come up here this summer for a big 2-week trip. I was guiding some snowshoe hikes for some of the places down in southern Vermont where I spend my winters, and I spent a lot of time with a lot of the birds at the museum where I'm a volunteer and board member, and that was a kind of a fun thing to get to go in there a couple times a week. The museum closed, and so I was up there a couple times a week, and there's nobody in there. Closed because of COVID, or
closed because of COVID.
So it'll reopen.
Yeah, we're reopened now, but the museum was closed down due to COVID, and so we never had more than one volunteer there at a time for a little while. So you'd go in and you'd come in from this world that was crazy and chaotic at the moment, and then go in and work with these birds that they don't know they don't know what's going on. They're just doing what they're doing, and that was a super nice.
Wait, you're making the claim that the birds weren't aware that there's a COVID pandemic?
Well, no, because they heard it as Corvid, and they were
gotcha.
like, "Oh, they're just always around."
Gotcha. That really makes sense.
It really does. We're getting back into the swing of things now. But that was a nice I understand the irony of saying it was a grounding experience when I'm talking about birds, but it was
we're full of puns. Huh?
I know, we're doing good. But it was nice. It was super fascinating to get to kind of see how they just kind of kept doing what they always did. That was pretty much how I spent my winter, was spending time around people until I couldn't take that anymore and going and hanging out with birds for hours at a time.
Yeah, I didn't mix with many other people. We have our own. My wife was calling it a pod, right?
Yeah.
Like a few people that you interact with.
Yeah.
And outside of that, didn't really.
Yeah, same.
Much.
I think dealing with the people is all that, because in this day and age with everything going on, all your connections are via the internet or your phone or anything like that, and that's a hard way to maintain any kind of friendship or relationship at the best of times. So
yeah,
having an out where you could go hang out with creatures that didn't need anything from you other than to throw them a mouse. That was kind of pleasant, rather than like the kind of the stress everybody was under all winter.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So one of the other big things that I did this winter was basically stopped using social media for several months.
Yeah.
And that was great. I don't consider like podcasting or blogging or shooting videos really social media. I think of that more as just creating, being a creative person and creating content. That, the social media are the big services, Facebook, Instagram, those sorts of things. And, just kind of logged off and didn't log back on. Plan to, continue to post things there, especially as we kind of ramp up the media production here during the semester like we usually do. That was added even more to my sense of some isolation, I think, especially initially. And, having read a lot of the studies about we're looking for likes and, for the little serotonin hits in your brain, it was an interesting it was an interesting season, to step away from that. And, initially I didn't have the energy to push the buttons on the phone even. So it was,
jeez.
But it was an interesting experiment, and glad I did it.
Yeah, it's a super fascinating thing because you always, if you're running a business, at least for me, you think that when your brain is like, oh, I got to take a picture of this, it's a business thing. But if you're involved in social media, it's you have to come to terms with the fact that you're not just being a crafty consumer or whatever. You are hooked to the wagon that they've hooked you to a little bit. And so having, finishing up the season here and then going back for the winter and kind of getting out of that mindset of like, if I'm doing something, I got to take a picture because how else will people know that I'm doing it?
Or it didn't happen, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
Video,
so having
the
winter is always a nice break for that for me.
And we were talking earlier before we hit the record button about how it's nice. And personally, I really enjoy the having a season where we create a bunch of media like podcasts, videos, whatever. And then a season where you don't, like an opportunity to step away from that world and just sort of be like a regular person or maybe an irregular person now, where you're just out doing things, having experiences where everything doesn't need to be documented.
Right.
And, because it's kind of exhausting doing something for the sake of doing it. And then at the same time, in the back of your mind is this little voice like, take 8 pictures and have details or it didn't happen. And, so being able to step away from that was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. But now we're back.
Yeah. So we will be much more. I know I can't. Well, you were totally off of it, so I assume the same. But I also sort of no longer really interact on social media, and so maybe now that things are ramping up, you'll be able to get a hold of me and with stuff a little easier. But I'm going to try to keep a distance from that as much as I can because it's just so much more pleasant.
Yeah, life seems to be better where you're not inundated with that
it's
stuff.
Almost like living outside of a fishbowl is better than being in a fishbowl.
Not if you're a fish.
Couldn't they just live in the ocean? Where
Yeah,
they're supposed to be?
But they couldn't live on the counter.
What?
Well, like a fish needs water. If there's no bowl to hold the water, a pond, a river, the ocean, whatever. But
the point was that you shouldn't be. This is all right. Well, we're definitely back for the season. We're back to Christopher not understanding what's going on.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we just wanted to sort of reintroduce ourselves to those of you out in podcast land, and we're going to make an effort to publish one of these at least once a week, and go from there. So if you're curious about what we're doing here, the plan is to shoot a bunch of videos about the process of running the semester program and to publish them on our private online community at bushcraftschool.com. That's free to join if you'd like. And potentially we've got, in the next couple of weeks, a couple more online courses that'll be going up there. The first one, which will be the thermal cooking course, which I've been threatening for a long time. But we use those thermal cookers on a daily basis here. And it's just a great way to use less fuel and to be more efficient and cook real food when you're in the outdoors, as opposed to like freeze-dried, overpriced, oversalted kind of convenience food. Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah, so that online network is where a lot of sort of the more detailed versions of stuff that you see on other places online ends up. So if you're curious about what we're doing and want to see it in depth, that's the place to go and check out, because often you just get a glimpse of it with all the other sort of avenues of media.
Yeah, and it's probably the best way to interact with us as well. Like, I guess when I quit social media, or when I came back from being sick, I had a blog post saying that I'm no longer like answering like Facebook or Instagram messages and stuff. Yep. And the reason for that was it just became too much, where someone would say, every single platform has their own like messaging thing. Mm-hmm. So if like, for example, if I'm on Facebook, I don't actually log on to Facebook It used to be about once a month, and now it's even less than that. So if somebody would send me a message, like they'd never hear back from me. So just to sort of pick and choose your communication channels that you're going to monitor, because I realized, like, if I have 20 channels to monitor, it means that I don't monitor any of them well. So, but if I have 2 or maybe 3, then I can kind of keep up, and that was kind of the thing there. So the channel on the online community network, that's monitored pretty well. And we both embraced, is it Signal? The messaging app Signal. So we're on there if you need to get a hold of us.
Yeah, but so if you're reaching out to us through, like Tim said, Facebook or Instagram or something like that, there's a good chance we probably won't see it for a while.
Yeah.
Which is a conscious decision, not us being jerks. And I don't, it's not like I have my nose in the air. Like, I'm better than that with social media. It's just there's only so many hours in the day, and it just becomes a big distraction. And to me, honestly, it's like that. It's frustrating when there's something in the back of your head where you're like, oh, I need to get to that, and you never have time to. Like, I don't like living like that. I'd much rather, like, okay, here are the things I need to do and the channels I need to monitor, and I can do it well, rather than do it like a half-assed job on way more than, biting off way more than I can chew, and it all turns into a half-assed job. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of the rationale behind that. So yeah, join us, bushcraftschool.com, if you're curious about what we do. And I guess it's good to be back. I kind of miss doing this, and it's kind of fun. Yeah,
I did a bunch this winter on the other podcast with other people, but it feels good to be back in the...
Plug your podcast, just in case.
So the podcast is the School of the Forest podcast. It's kind of a little bit like this one, but sort of devoted to involving scientists and sort of naturalists and people that actively work in the outdoors doing something different than what we do. So I've had people on that work with natural dyes. I've had on some friends of mine that do human waste management in a sustainable way. So using that stuff for agriculture and stuff like that. So it's a little bit like this one, but different enough to, I think, keep your interest. But if you want the jokes, come here, because they don't show up on the other one very often. It's almost like when Tim and I get together, we have a hard time doing anything but making puns about crows.
Yeah, well, sure.
I mean, there's good stuff in there too, but it's mostly the jokes, right?
I don't know. It's debatable whether there's good stuff or not.
It's good to be back. Good to be back in this little saddle.
So if you enjoy this podcast, share it with somebody. You kind of know the drill at this point. But hey guys, like, subscribe, and click the notification button at the bottom.
So this is sort of a little offhand thing, but Tim was talking about how there's so many different channels and they're all kind of going off at once. And I had a point last fall that was kind of the point where I just took all of that stuff off of my phone, because each of those little like messaging systems has a different sound.
Oh yeah.
And so there was a point, it was like a 30-second thing, and it sounded like someone trying to remember a tune, like beep boop doop beep boop bing boop boop, like
a 80s robot.
It was chaos, and that was the point where I was like, "Yep, this needs to go. This is not. I don't like this."
That's another reason why I miss the 80s, because in the 80s, every person who did well in school, this was before the nerd uprising of 1983.
I'm so worried about where this is going.
Well, they could all build their own humanoid robot, and they all had those weird sound systems like you just did.
Isn't that how you made me?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's how I got here.
Yeah.
I have no memory before 2016 where I was born.
Right.
Born?
I don't know. Hatched?
Teach me
Created.
to love.
He's so human, but he can't love.
It's funny because it's true.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right. Yeah, we should wrap this up.
Let's wrap it up.
Good to be back. Talk to you guys later.
See you later. You have been listening to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast. For more information on our professional wilderness guide training programs that are college accredited and GI Bill approved, visit us on the web at jackmtn.com.